Hello, rebellious gardeners. My name is Bonnie, and I'm the president of the amazing Gal's Guide to the Galaxy Women's History Library. I also happen to have a slight obsession with growing and saving seeds to go along with my other obsessions of puppies and women throughout history. This first class is going to go over a bunch of the stuff that you would want to know before starting your seeds. And if you have any questions along the way, please let me know. Doesn't look like it'll let me check the chat room while the slides are going, but I will definitely circle back and see if there are any in the chat later. So, where to find your seeds? There's all different types of places where you can get seeds from. A big one is online. Some of my favorite websites are MI Gardener, Johnny's Selected Seed, Baker Creek, Botanical Interest, Seed Savers Exchange, San Diego Seed Company, Swallowtail Seeds, and I've heard a lot of people get seeds from Haas Tools. You can buy seeds on places like Etsy and eBay, but just be a bit more cautious about what you buy. I've seen listed, goodness, I've seen listings for AI generated flowers, and you may end up with bad seeds or seeds that have not been tested for their germination rate. Big box stores, a lot of um, like your Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, and Meyer are putting out all their giant seed displays, so they've got a bunch there. Nurseries, local plant nurseries should have seeds too. You might want to call ahead because right now they may not be open to the public, especially if they're like the smaller nurseries. Around here, ones that should be open year round are like Sullivan's and Allisonville Nursery. Libraries. Most public libraries now have seed libraries. These are usually run by local master gardener groups or growing clubs. The seeds are free and do not require that you return any seed. The two public libraries that I've gotten seeds from say that there's a limit on how many you can check out in a season, but every time I've gone to the counter to figure out like how you scan them to check them out, they've just been like, just take them. Like, we don't care, just take them. So this is a really good resource, but just don't take all the seeds. Gal's Guide also has a seed library, which should be replenished in the next week or two. The dollar store always has packets of seeds too, and they are often grown from the same companies that sell them to the big box stores. So often it'll be from like the same batch of seeds. So that's a good place to get them for a little bit less. And there's goodness, seed exchange events. Many towns will have these. Hamilton County and was it with Tipton up north just had one a couple weeks ago. I have not made it to that one yet. But these are places where you can swap seeds, buy seeds. Sometimes they give away seeds. They usually have little growing workshops there. So if you see one of those around, that would be a good thing to check out. And the grocery store. You can actually get a lot of seeds from the grocery store. And there was a big rise of people doing this in 2020 during COVID, because a lot of the um, seed places online and the big box stores were like running out of seeds, and people were wanting to grow their own food because they were worried about like the supply chain stuff. So a lot of people started getting stuff from the grocery store. So some of the things that you can get from the grocery store that you can totally just grab and grow at home are dried beans, organic potatoes, garlic or ginger, peppers, tomatoes, and watermelon, as long as they're not the seedless kind. because you can't get the seeds from a seedless watermelon. You want to grab organic potatoes and garlic because sometimes the regular ones are sprayed with a sprout inhibitor to prevent them from sprouting while they're in the store. And there's a whole bunch more in the spice aisle, which include dill and coriander, which is the same plant as cilantro. For some reason, we call those two different spices, whether it's like the leaves of the plant is cilantro, and when it goes to seed, it's coriander. Mustard, fennel, poppy. With the poppy seeds, I think they're usually what are they called, like bread seed poppy, something like that, or broad seed, something like that. You'll have no idea what color they're going to be because they're not grown for like the color. So that may be a fun little experiment if you want to try that. What I would not recommend getting from the grocery store to harvest seeds from are a lot of the fruits, the apples, oranges, peaches, all those type of like tree fruits. While it's possible to save the seeds from those, you're not guaranteed to get the same type of fruit from that parent like fruit. Give you an apple and you really like it and you save the seeds from that apple, you may, if you grow that seed out, it may not be the same as the apple you tasted because that seed is the genetics from that flower that became the apple getting pollinated to make those seeds. So if you have two apple trees growing next to each other, the genetics are going to cross. And if they're not the same type of apple tree, which they're often not, um, you're going to have a random genetics from this apple. And to grow an apple tree from a seed is going to take you years. And it would be a shame to spend years growing this apple tree from this little seed just to end up with like mushy apples. So, most of the fruit trees that we get fruit from are actually like clones, like they cut off a little stick of it and graft it onto like sturdy root stock. So a lot of fruit trees, there'll be like a little nubbin near the root, and that's where the graft was. Like all of the bananas that we eat are all clones from the same plant. And people are really worried that if a disease comes by and wipes them out, which almost happened once, we may not have bananas anymore. So when you go seed shopping, some other little things, uh, don't try to grow food that your family's not going to eat. If nobody likes tomatoes, then don't grow them. Like no one says you have to grow tomatoes. There's lists online for like how much food do you need to grow to feed your family for whatever size. And these are like weird little lists. At best, the people are making a list. If you can find the author, it's usually just like a picture that they're writing down what they plant each year, but more often than not, someone has just like made up this list out of thin air. So you can use those at a guide as a guide, and adjust it to what you think your family might eat. You do not need to buy organic seeds. Just because a seed packet isn't labeled organic doesn't mean it wasn't necessarily grown with organic methods, especially if it's a small seed company. There's a lot involved with getting your organic certification. Um, and then if you're a big company and if you don't have to spend the money on buying pesticides, then you probably don't want to. Um, and then even if the seeds are not organic, even if they came from a fruit that was sprayed with pesticides, even if that pesticide did get into the seed, it's going to be like a drop in a swimming pool. Like there's really not going to be that much of like the bad stuff in that seed, especially if you're growing organically and not sprayed stuff. It's really not going to have an effect on that like final product. So don't Don't fret too much about buying organic. You certainly can. It's not going to hurt. But if you want to save a little money, you don't have to. And then as a gardener, it is impossible for you to get GMO seeds. The only way to get GMO seeds is if you are like a big time farmer and you have to sign a contract to get these seeds. Like it's a big deal. They don't just give out GMO seeds. There was an incident last year with Baker Creek. They were selling a dark purple tomato that they thought might have been modified with the genes from, I think it was a sweet pea to give it that color. And they had already printed the catalogs. It was on the front of the catalog, I think. And they, as soon as they realized that might have been the case, they pulled the seeds, they didn't sell them, and they did genetic testing on the seeds and found out that they weren't GMO. Um, but that's also what they say. Um, and then it's a thing. A lot of seed packets will say that they are non-GMO, and it's just like a thing. People are worried about GMO, so they have to put those on the packet as like a precaution. Because if you don't know and you're going to buy seeds and one packet says it's non-GMO and the other one doesn't, you may assume that the other one is GMO seeds. So they put that on there. It's kind of like a bag of apples from the grocery store saying that they're gluten free. Like there's no gluten because it's not bread. And then shopping for seeds can be expensive. And one way that folks cut down on the cost is to make a list. And person A buys this one set of seeds, and person B will buy seeds from another list. And you can split the packets so everybody gets them. I wasn't sure how well these would show up. How to read a seed packet. Each one of the seed packets are going to be different, but they all generally carry about the same information. So these seed packets, we've got one from Burpee, M.I. Gardner, Johnny Seeds, and Baker Creek. So some of the information that should be on there is how much sunlight it needs. It'll either say shade, part sun or shade, or full sun, which is 8 hours. And that 8 hours doesn't have to be all at one time. It can get 4 in the morning and 4 in the evening, and that's fine. Planting depth in it'll say like how deep you need to plant your seed, whether you're putting it out in the garden or starting it inside. And just generally, the larger the seed, the deeper it gets planted. You can't plant snapdragon seeds, which are like tiny little grains of sand, as deep as you would for bean seeds, which are usually like an inch down. They don't have enough like energy to make it to the surface. Um, and then some of the seeds will say to like lightly cover or barely cover. Some seeds need light to actually germinate. It'll say if it's an annual or a perennial. All of your regular like vegetables are going to be annuals, at least here. Um, Perennial, there'll be some flowers that you can see that'll be perennial. But annual means you need to plant it annually, and perennial means it'll survive the winter and come back on its own each year as long as it's planted in the right growing zone. Plant spacing will tell you how far apart the plants need to be in order for them to have enough room to grow. Sometimes the spacing will also talk about row spacing, which is more for like farming machines. Like that information's just still been kind of passed down on the seed packets. So it'll say something like plant 1 foot apart and rows 3 feet apart. You can just plant them all 1 foot apart, even if it's the next row. That's supposed to give you enough room for like the machine to get through. Like radishes only need about 1 or 3 inches apart, where a broccoli plant needs something like 18 to 36 inches to have enough room because they get big leaves. And so you want to pay attention to where you plant them. And that'll be when you're planting them out in the garden. In your seed packets, like if you're starting them indoors from seed, just put them in that little cell and it'll be fine. Sowing, the package should also tell you if they recommend starting the seeds outside after your last frost, which is called direct sowing, or if you can start it indoors. If you can start it indoors, it'll tell you how many weeks before your last frost to plant them, or sometimes it'll just say like March to May. Like this first packet from Burpee is just kind of got a map of the US and it gives you like a general timeline of where to plant them. So Indiana here is green, so it'd be April, June, or August through September. This is from a pack of celery, I think. Yeah. Or the next one over is My Gardener, and you can start it indoors 8 to 12 weeks before your last frost. Your packet will also have germination time or sprouts in time. It's going to let you know how long it should take for your plant to pop out of the soil, as long as they're planted correctly. Some seeds can take as little as like 2 or 3 days. Like lettuce or radishes are usually pretty quick to pop up, but some can take like 3 weeks, especially like peppers and a lot of the perennial flowers can take that long. So when you're trying to plan out when to start your seeds, you need to like take that into account too. Let's see, like that first In My Gardener one's 14 to 21. Where is that one? See, they don't even have it. Oh, that's funny. I think these are both. Oh no, that's an artichoke. The onion, I don't think says how many. Yeah, 4 to 10 days to germinate for that one. And then the Johnny C packets they're hard for me to read. I almost need to come in here with all of them with a highlighter. That one takes 14 to 21 days. But when I try to figure out like some of the other information, I'm reading this whole paragraph and I'm like, oh. And then you got to look for them. Like this Baker Creek one, it's like down the side is where they have the information. Let's see. They should have the maturity or time to harvest. This will give you an idea of how long it'll take to grow until the plant's ready to harvest. But this information is like a little tricky because it's, let's see, days till maturity. So this artichoke, it says it's going to take 121 days to reach maturity. So they're saying that in 120 days, it'll need to grow for 120 days for you to be able to harvest it. But that is under like the most optimum growing conditions. And if you're just planting this outside, it's not going to be optimum growing conditions every single day. So you'll probably want to add in a little bit of extra time there for that. But that also usually does not include your germination time. Or so for that one, you need to add in an extra 14 to 21 days. And then sometimes they also mean actually when you're transplanting it outside. So sometimes that 120 days will start when you're actually planting it outside. So you got to kind of keep that in mind for when you're trying to, harvest something in August. You have to count back those days plus your germination days plus a little bit more just to be safe. Temperature. Most seeds, if you're starting them indoors, will start in your regular house temperature just fine. Some, like peppers, would love to have like a heat mat or to be placed on top of your fridge, is where a lot of people will put them because there's like that heating element up there. And then some can germinate at a lower temperature. This would be more of like your cold loving vegetables. Like I think kale might germinate a little at a little lower temperature. They usually don't have to be that lower temperature, but they usually can if you're wanting to grow in a like, oh, what's that called? Like a little greenhouse outside, like a window box. You can maybe start seeds that can tolerate that cold a little faster up there and get going a little faster. Your seed package should also always have like a date on them. On these, let's see, like this burpee pack was packed for 2014. It'll either say packed for a year or it'll just have like a date. And this is just like for their records, like this is when they want to be selling these seeds. It's on them, so they are not selling you bad seed. That does not mean that your seed packets expire that year. Just because it's packed for that year, that doesn't mean at the end of the year your seeds are bad. Do not throw away your seeds. It will give you an idea. Like these seeds that I bought in 2014, this celery, I don't know. I don't know when celery seeds go bad. Usually onions and carrot seeds are rumored to go bad in like 2 or 3 years. So I would recommend using up older seed first. But like I just planted this packet from 2014. It hasn't sprouted yet, but I think it takes a while. Yeah, that one says takes 10 to 21 days, and I just started them like a week ago. Uh, okay. And then, so how you find your first and last frost dates? The website that I recommend is almanac.com, but you can also just type into a browser when's the last frost date for like your nearest city, and it should tell you. I like almanac.com because you can just put in your zip code. And for the Gals Guide Library, the zip code is 46060. It's popping up as Carmel, which has got me feeling a type of way because it's Noblesville. Um, but it says on here that our last estimated spring frost is going to be April 28th, and our first estimated fall frost is October 15th. Um, and that our growing season is 169 days long. And what they've done to get these dates is they've pulled in all the weather data and they're averaging it out. I'm not sure how far back. I don't know if it goes back 100 years or if it's just like the last 20 years. So it's an estimate, and it doesn't exactly mean that the last frost is going to be on April 28th because it's Indiana. The weather gets crazy, but it's an estimate for you to get started. And back in like April 18th, you can start looking at the 10-day forecast and see if you're going to have any frost. So it's a tool for you to get an estimate. And then for your growing season, for us it's 169 days, which is pretty good. But if you have like a loofah that says it takes 180 days to grow, you probably can't grow that at least from just planting it in the ground on April 28th and get a finished loofah. You might be able to cheat it a little bit by starting it indoors, or if you have like a greenhouse, you can kind of extend your growing season a little bit. So you'll want to pay attention to how long your growing season is for what you're growing. Most stuff doesn't take that long. And then let's see here. Growing zones. This is the USDA, gosh, what do they call it? The plant hardiness map. So your growing zone is determined by the average minimum winter temperature. There are 10 growing zones for the US, and they've been recently split into A and B, so there's like technically 20. And they just updated the map a year or two ago. I think they update it every 10 years. Indianapolis used to be right on the line between 5 and 6 before the last update. Now it's kind of in 6A. which means we've warmed up a little bit. And while it's really good to know your growing zones don't matter at all for like vegetables or annual flowers because you're replanting them every year. It's more for like trees or perennial plants. Like if you want to grow an orange, you're probably not going to be able to leave it outside in Indiana because of the average like minimum temperature in Indiana. So it's more for those type of things. Some of the seed packets will kind of have that same little map on the back to give you an idea of when to start planting them. When to start your seeds. Your seed packet should tell you. Um, and I'll say something like start indoors 4 weeks before your last frost date, or sometimes it just gives you like a month or your growing zone, like on that burpee packet. If you're unsure, you can look up the seed company online or just any seed company that sells, like if you're trying to look for a zinnia, you can look up any zinnia and it'll tell you. Um, and that should give you an idea of when to start them. I usually use Burpee's website if I don't have it immediately on my seed packet or if like I was gifted seeds because their website you can actually just put in your zip code and I think it gives you like a window of like a week of when to start it. Some seeds will say to direct sow after your last frost. So if you're going to plant one of those seeds in gardens outside of the Gals Guide Library, you would do so after April 28th, or at least plan to, because that's when
Hey,
the last
Bonnie,
frost is. Uh-huh.
what does lightly surface sow mean?
That means you're gonna, what I usually do is I plant them on the top and then I just kind of ruffle up the dirt like an eighth of an inch. So if a seed packet's saying that, then it probably needs light to germinate. So they
Okay.
just want you to just barely have
Co-
any kind of dirt on there. Or you can put them, if you're starting them indoors, you can have your dirt down and then sprinkle your seeds and then just put like the lightest sprinkling of dirt over them.
Okay.
Mm.
Sorry to interrupt. I was
Oh, you're
looking at
good.
my seeds that Josh got me for Christmas.
Nice. Which seeds did you get?
Oh my gosh, it's a huge pack. It's
Nice.
all the veggies.
Nice. Let's see here. And then, yep. So you can look them up. Good places to find the information would be other seed companies that are selling those seeds, or I found some that are like growing groups, or like the your local extension office may have that information. Um, there are some weird like gardening blogs out there that are like not correct and weird. And you can check a couple different sources and kind of find a happy medium. Some special seeds. These are some seeds you might need to know like a little bit more to figure out kind of like which type of those seeds to get. Um, so tomatoes, there's two big types of tomatoes. They're called either determinate or indeterminate, and they have two different types of growing habits. Determinate tomato plants, not like the fruit, but the plant as a whole tends to be smaller, maybe 4 or 5 feet tall, and they're supposed to set fruit like once and then they're done. A lot of people have these like on their patios in a little pot. Indeterminate tomatoes will just keep on going. They will keep growing until the frost. A tomato is actually like a vine, so you can trellis it real easily. Otherwise, it'll like if you don't stake it, it'll grow along the ground, and that's a whole thing. They can get diseases, and I don't understand how the tomato plant has lived this long. If it's so sensitive to being splashed by like water and diseases, it's a miracle tomatoes are still around. It's probably because people just love tomatoes so much. Um, but yeah, they will keep setting fruit until the frost. If you do want to have a determinate tomato, like in a pot, like on your patio, Your pot should be at least 5 gallons. And then both tomatoes and peppers really like much warmer soil. So it's best to wait a couple weeks after your last frost date to put them in the ground. I usually plan on putting my tomatoes and peppers in Mother's Day weekend. And they won't because it's after your frost. They're not going to die if you put them in when the soil's not warmed up to their liking, but they'll just kind of like sit there or they may get like stunted a little bit. So for those ones, it's best to wait a couple more weeks. Beans, kind of like the tomatoes, there's two different types. There's pole beans and bush beans. Pole beans like to climb up a structure and will fruit for longer, while bush beans only get like a foot or two tall and they'll put out a whole bunch of beans at once. Onions, there's three types of onions. There's long day, short day, and intermediate day. And this has to do with the amount of sunlight around the solstice. They're weird. Um, so onions start to bulb up after, I forget if it's the spring and it's got to be the summer solstice. So here in central Anna, goodness, here in central Indiana, we can grow both long day and intermediate day onions. And there's several different ways that you can get onions. In my opinion, the best way is to grow them from seed. You get more choices and varieties, and the cost is way down because the packet of seeds is going to be like $3. Um, and then you also have, oh, what they call them? Onion, shoot, not sets. I think they're called onion starts, where they're like little baby onion plants, and they usually come in like a bundle, kind of like in a rubber band, and they're still like green, like they're growing green onions out of the top, and they'll have little bulbs, and you can plant those. But I would not recommend what they're calling onion sets, and these look like teeny tiny dried up onion bulbs. Onions are a biannual plant, which means it grows a bulb one year and then it goes to flower the next. Those little onion sets, more often than not, the little onion plant thinks it's already grown for one season. So when you plant those, they often will try to just flower instead of make an onion bulb. But either way, you can get green onions. Even if they flower, you can just cut the flower off and you can still get green onions, but they won't want a bulb. Potatoes. You won't find potato seeds, not like in your normal store anyway. The best way to grow potatoes is from other potatoes. You just put the potato in the ground, which is so fun. You usually hill up the dirt around it to give it more room to grow more potatoes. So you can either plant the whole potato or you can do a process of, I think it's called chitting, where you can cut the potato into sections and leave it out for like a day or two for it to like kind of dry up and scar. But each one of those sections will need to have the eye of the potato because that's where the root will come out of. So you won't find potato seeds that'll be like potatoes, and you can buy like potatoes for growing. A lot of times the big box stores will have them out with like the daffodil bulbs over there. Garlic is kind of similar to potatoes, but you grow those by taking your whole garlic bulb and breaking it into little cloves, and you plant the individual cloves, and each one of those will grow into another garlic bulb. But like potatoes, like there's technically seeds available, but that's like the fastest, easiest way to get garlic. Garlic's a little tricky because it is a really long growing season. I think most of the types that I've seen, they're like 270 days. But those garlic's meant to be overwintered. So here in Indiana, I usually put mine in like September or October, and we're usually harvesting them either at the end of June or July. And they overwinter. You can put mulch over them if you're worried about them. There's also two different like types. There's hard neck and soft neck. The hard neck is a bit more winter hardy, and you'll get these things called garlic scapes that you'll have to trim off in the spring. They try to grow, it's like the flower stalk, so you can cut that off because you don't want it to flower, you want it to bulb. And you can eat that. It's very good, especially in stir fries. And you can freeze it and cut it up. It'll be like a little, like a dense green onion. That'll taste like garlic. Oh, or there's the soft neck, which are supposed to be like a little less winter hardy, but those are the ones if you want like a garlic braid, you get those and you can braid the garlic. But you can't do that with the hard neck because it'll just like snap. Um, And then root vegetables. Most of your root vegetables really would rather be direct sown into the garden. Radishes, turnips, carrots. If you try to start a carrot indoor in like a growing tray, then it'll get all crooked and funky because it's the root. You've like disturbed the root. Um, Beets, though, you can start beets indoors and they're fine for some reason. Let's see. So some beginner plants, some plants that I think are a little easier to grow. Um, we've got beans, cucumber, lettuce, peas, radishes, spinach, tomatoes, zucchini. For herbs, get cilantro, dill, basil. For flowers, it's cosmos, marigolds, sunflowers, sweet peas, zinnias. These are all like they're pretty easy. Not a lot of them have a whole lot of diseases. Tomatoes will get weird diseases. But they're all pretty chill plants. They usually don't cause a whole lot of trouble. Some more challenging plants can be broccoli and cauliflower. They get pretty big and sometimes a little tricky to figure out when to clip them. They'll get, what is it called? Cabbage, not a cabbage moth, like a little moth will try to eat them all the time, and it looks like a little white butterfly, and it's so cute, but it's like super deadly. Well, to the plant, not to us. They'll plant their egg larvae in there, and it'll eat your plant. Carrots are a little tricky. Um, we can talk about that a week too, but they're just a little trickier than just planting them in the ground. They're tiny seeds and they want to wash away, but they don't really want to be covered very much, but they want to stay pretty moist all the time. They're a little bit more effort. Celery, I think most celery needs to be sun blanched, which is like a whole crazy process. Uh, Corn, um, you can't just plant like one or two stalks of corn. You need to have kind of like a block of corn altogether because it gets pollinated by wind. The little tassels up there have the pollen and it comes down through the plants. You need to kind of have like a little cluster of them. And if they don't get pollinated, then they're not going to have the little seed kernels. Garlic, we talked about, it's just longer growing season and kind of unexpected. A lot of people, when they get into growing, they get into it in like the spring. If they try to plant garlic in the spring, I mean, um, you may get the stalks to come up, but you won't get like the bulbs. Rice, there's rice like paddy field rice, but then there's like rice that we can grow here. It's a little trickier. For flowers, dahlias are a little tricky because a lot of them will have tubers that you need to like dig up every year. Some of the other bulbing ones will too. Lavender's a little hard to get started. Um, it's a little picky. You have to cold stratify it or just plant like a bunch of them. Mm, Um, but you can always try to grow any of these things. You just need to kind of be aware that they may be little butt heads, and then it's not just you. They're just butthead plants that can be a bit of a challenge. You can also buy plants. That's totally a thing you can do. You can say, screw starting seeds. I just want to buy little baby plants and pop them in. Um, and you can get them at big box stores. You can get them at nurseries. You have to be careful though. Just because they have the plants out does not mean it's time to put them in the ground. You still want to pay attention to your last frost date. There's some plants that I recommend do not recommend that you purchase a plant as plant starts. These are going to be your root vegetables, your radish, your carrot, your turnip. I don't think I've ever seen a carrot out in a store. I think I might have seen radishes before. But yeah, they're root vegetables. If you go to plant them, they're going to be funky. Um, Also lettuce. I see lettuce pretty often in the little plant starts. And if you're buying a little six pack of lettuce for, $8 when you can buy a whole finished head of lettuce for $1, like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense just monetarily to do that. And lettuce grows pretty quick. It's usually about 60 days, and you can start it from seed inside. So, like that would be one that I would advise that you skip buying from the store. Um, Trees and fruit trees, you need to do your research before you just buy any fruit tree that you see at a big box stores. They don't pay attention at all to if that location is in a particular growing zone. A lot of the fruit trees also need so many chill hours for growing over winter to make fruit, and they're just selling plants. Like they're not, Home Depot does not care about that kind of stuff. They're just selling a popular apple. Like they they put them out all throughout the country, no matter where it is. So if you're gonna do trees or fruit trees, you need to just take a little bit more time to do the research on what will grow good in your area. Like we can't plant orange trees just in the ground here. You can maybe wheel them out in a large container and bring them in for the winter, maybe, but you can't grow them outside. Even if the Lowe's down the street is selling an orange, that doesn't mean we can grow oranges here. Um, there are some plants you should purchase as starts. So be strawberries are a lot easier to buy from or to grow from starts than from seed. Any of your like berry bushes or vines, you can either buy like the green plant or what they call the bare root, which will kind of look like a dead little stick with fruits. But I've done it before. Like it's a little scary when you get one in the mail and it's like I bought a box of sticks and you worry that they're gonna make it, but they make it. It takes a lot longer to grow from seed for like strawberries or something. Um, and then supplies for next class. You don't actually have to go out and buy these things, but if you like are itching to get started, you can go ahead and get some of these things. And like after our next class here in 2 weeks, you can probably go ahead and get started on these things. First thing you'll need is your seeds. And it sounds like Katie already has some seeds. So good job. You'll need a growing medium. I often get these little burpee blocks. They're cocoa core. You can also get some that are peat moss. And these ones, they're like compacted in there and you pour water on them to expand. And they're like $5. Um, but whatever mix you get, it needs to be a seed starting mix, not a potting mix, and not just straight up compost, not topsoil, and don't just grab dirt from your yard. There'll be bugs in there, and it's a whole big mess, in your house with a bunch of little buggies. Um, I've seen people use Pro Mix, and it's advertised as like a multiple use mix. I use it as potting mix, and I've used it out in the garden. I haven't used it as starting mix yet. I've thought about it, So that's also one that you can maybe use. But your the mix that you start with your seeds needs to be a sterile mix, and we'll go over in the next class how to sterilize it if you're worried that it's not sterile. I always sterilize this cocoa core regardless um, for these, and I do it with a boiling water method because these need to be watered anyway. Pots. You can get all kinds of crazy containers out there. There's so many different options you can choose. I like to use these little cells that either come in like a group of 6 or 9, and I like them when they can detach instead of just having the whole thing be one giant piece. It gets a little frustrated when you're trying to like pull some out to transplant them, or you only want to plant like half of it. It gets a little complicated. So I would recommend ones that are either already detached or you can, like they're perforated and you can take them apart instead of trying to like cut them apart. Um, there's all different like varieties of these. I think these ones are Bootstrap Farmer. They're really sturdy. You can buy them online through their website. You can buy them from Amazon. A lot of nurseries and seed companies will also carry them too. Um, they're really sturdy and you'll use them for like years, but they are a bit more expensive. But if they ever do break, they're also completely recyclable. So you can recycle them. You can get the ones just at the big box stores are going to be a bit more flimsy. Maybe only be able to use them for like a year or two, but I mean, whatever gets you started, like that's fine. Um, a lot of people, let's see, and these trays, they're usually, like a inch or inch and a half square, like on the top, and they'll go down like 2 or 3 inches. Like that's a good size for starting seeds. There'll be some that are bigger, there'll be some that are smaller. I probably wouldn't go any smaller than that size. Um, because otherwise you're gonna have to transplant it like immediately. You can even use plastic cups. My first couple years gardening, I grabbed clear, I don't know, they weren't quite the standard like red solo cup. They were a little smaller. They were like 4 or 5 inches deep, and I put dirt in them, and I put them in the windowsills of my house. Is where I put them all. So they all just lined my windowsills in my house. It didn't work the best, but that's what I had, and that's how I got started. Um, yeah, for if you want to do any kind of DIY plastic containers, um, any of them that are not clear, you don't want clear ones because you don't want the roots to get exposed to sunlight. Like the plants aren't going to like that. Um, any like food grade plastic is going to be pretty good. Um, you can use yogurt cups. I probably wouldn't do the ones that like taper in at the top, because I think Yoplait does that. It'll be hard to get the plant out of that. You'll have to like cut it out of there. Probably not a glass container. It's probably not going to be good. Um, some of these places will have these little cell containers that like you can pop the seed out of there. Let's see here. And then I do not recommend getting these little expanding pellet things. They have this like mesh on there that it says that it breaks down. It does not break down. Our At our last house, I was finding stuff after we had been there like 4 years. I was still finding this webbing stuff from when the previous owner had planted stuff. It does not break down. Like if you really want to use these, when you go to plant it in the ground, cut the webbing off. Um, these little peat containers, like I get it, you don't want to use plastic. These are made from like paper and wood pulp. Um, and they're okay if you're starting seeds that are gonna be in there for like 12 weeks. They can get like kind of moldy and gross. They can start to break down, kind of. like they don't break down as well. They'll break down way faster than this webbing stuff. But if you want to use those, you can cut off the bottom when you go to plant them, and that'll give the roots more room to go through there because they have a hard time breaking through those. Um, are there other ones? Egg curtains. Egg curtains are cute, but you're not gonna have that much room in there, and they'll need to like be transplanted like immediately, which may not be good for the plant. You usually want to do that when it's got like 2 or 3 leaves growing, and by the time that's happening, they're gonna be not doing so great in there. But yeah, next week we're gonna go over how to actually like start your seeds and start caring for your little baby baby plants. Anyone have any questions? I can check the little chat thingy here.
Do you store your little bags of seeds in a special container?
You can store your seeds anywhere where it is cool, dark, and dry. Let me grab that little container here because I have it right here. What I really love are these little containers that are actually meant for, oh goodness, that shows up really weird. They're meant for like photos. It's a big case and then it has these smaller cases in there. And because I'm a weirdo, I also like sort them in each thing. Like this all has radishes. Goodness, that looks really weird. But it's a little container, so all my radishes are in here, and you can either sort them. A lot of people either sort them by like the type, or some people will put their whole, you know, this is my what I'm starting 8 weeks before my frost and 7 weeks before my frost. So some people will do those. But yeah, you can store them anywhere where they're going to be cool, dark, and dry. Probably not your garage or your sheds. Probably not going to be good. Like the temperature's not going to be good for them. They could get kind of moist in there, and also some critters may get to them. Probably not be a good spot for them. Yeah, does anyone have any other questions for getting started? Getting ready to get your seeds, get seeds starting. This plant trays. Don't worry about the clear dome, the humidity dome on top. I've never used them. Like they tend to get like too hot and stuff gets kind of just they stay wet too long and they get too moist. They get moldy. And if they're too wet at the soil level for too long, they get this thing called dampening off, where they just kind of like almost like get cut off there and just fall off. Um, like a lot of those kits will have them in there. You just don't use them. Um, but you will want to have a some kind of container that has a like watertight bottom. Most of them will come with a tray that's got a solid bottom. Some of them will have like holes, but most of them will have solid bottom because you'll want to bottom water them, and that'll prevent them from getting too moldy or wet. But if you have, if you're doing them from like cups, you can get one of those like foil pans and put water in those. Um, I know someone who brings in their plants, and when they do watering, they will put them all in the bathtub and water them and leave them for a few hours and then get them out of the bathtub. But yeah, you got any other questions about stuff? That did end up being like an hour. I was kind of worried. I had so much little text typed up there. I was worried. I'm like, this is going to be like 4 hours long.
That was great information, Bonnie.
Hmm.
I appreciate it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, if you guys have any questions before our next class here, which is February 16th at the same time, you can either write them down, you can email me through Gal's Guide. You could probably even just reply to one of our social media posts promoting the class, and we can get back to you. But yeah, seed starting time. It's very exciting. I started some of my seeds last week because I have a problem.
You mean a talent?
Oh, well, I make my list. I have a spreadsheet that I keep my list of what all that, well, not like each individual thing. Like I have tomatoes. I don't have like each tomato on there, but I have a little, that does not want to work with my thing. I have a little spreadsheet.
Just put in front of your face.
Yeah, I can probably just pull it up on my thing here and share the screen. Garden, uh, share this one because I have a problem. Can you guys see that popping up
Yeah.
there? Yeah, I put in like each week of the year, and I put a little box. Our last frost date's the end of April, and I color code them. It's not really like spreadsheet, but so I know exactly like whatever week I'm on, what I can start. And because I have a problem, I usually start like, let's see, this will be our week. Sometimes I'll start the next week early. So I try to stick to that. Um, but you can go through and you can write down in a planner, like each week, you can mark it on like a calendar. Some people will sort their seeds into like little Ziploc baggies, and this is each week. There's all different kinds of ways that you can do that. But yeah, I've got it separated between vegetables and flowers. And because I'm a crazy person, I put gray for when I can like start it from seed. This darker green is when they can just go outside direct sow, and then
Mhm.
green will be like transplant. Um, like some of these things can deal with the frost a little bit better, so they can go out a little sooner. And then I even have this blue for things that need to be cold stratified, which is a whole nother thing that we'll talk about next week. You have to like simulate a little winter to get them to sprout. But yeah, I think that's it. Unless anyone's got any other questions, I will let you go and go look at all your little seed catalogs. Not want to show up real well. And go shopping for your seeds.
Awesome.
All
Thanks,
right,
Bonnie.
no problem. You guys have a nice day and happy seed shopping.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
too. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, Bonnie.
Thank you.